Hi, everyone, and welcome to this music production panel. My name is Christine Smith. I am the host of the Musicians versus the World podcast, and I'll be moderating this panel today. I'm so excited about our conversation. We are going to be talking about music production with our fantastic panel of music pros. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. First up, we have songwriter, music director, and composer for the Calm app, Eric Gerson. Hello, Eric.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And then next we have the co-founders of Old Saw Music, Megan Swartz and Mark Bro. Hello.
Hello, thanks for having us.
And then next we have the composer of the upcoming documentary Il Doge, A Portrait of Redemption, Tilo Schaller. Hello, Tilo.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And last but not least, we have Netflix's Little Siberia composer, Panu Altio. So welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. I'm so excited for this conversation. Our first question is actually for everybody. So we'll just kind of take turns answering that question. When you are starting a project and it's just the first little inspiration of a project, where do you usually start? Do you find inspiration in like a melody and build it from there? Or is it the harmonies? Or is it texture? Or does inspiration come from completely different places? So I'd love to get your kind of your work process at the very beginning and how you get your inspiration. Maybe we'll start with Panu on that. The rest of you can think about it for a minute, and then we'll go around. So Panu, how about you?
Yeah, for like film and TV project, I think definitely the mood is something that often comes first, because that's something that I'll start to sort of try to approach already from the script. Maybe if we have a discussion with the director and just try to think of the overall dramatic sort of themes that we want to hit on, that usually comes from a mood perspective, but then if you have like an edited picture, then the rhythm is a very strong part of that. So it then actually give you sort of very good sort of visceral reaction to a scene. Like you just have the sense that there's something moving in that scene, and if, especially it's like well edited, it's really lovely to kind of just vibe with the scene with on mute, and it just can be pretty magical. And sort of melody is something that I love the most, but that sort of comes from a more abstract place. Like it doesn't come straight from the picture. Like it's sort of something I build for a toolbox when I start a project.
So like overall it's mood first, and then when you see the picture, then you get the rhythm from that.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Tilo, how about you? You also work to picture a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So it very much depends on the project. Like I usually also go with the mood first. I choose instruments, I program synth patches, because I find that speaks the most immediate to a listener. Like before they can even like absorb melody, they just immediately impacted by like what they hear, like how it sounds. So that's like I create that color palette first that I'm going to compose with, and the rest is kind of built around that. But then there's also like the initial idea is often something that's even more abstract. So this could be like after reading the script or talking to the director, is just say like, I want to work with like particle sounding things, or like just very like just building an overall concept for something where I don't know exactly what that is yet. And then I go in there and find the ideas that I can build the score around. And that process then, like sometimes I play on the piano, sometimes it's in the computer, sometimes it's on my clarinet. So like where that comes from, I have no idea. So it's, so that's more or less my starting process, I would say. But a lot of discussions with the director, because they've been involved with the project for quite some time. So and they know the story best. So we talk a lot about story before I even start creating that first note.
Right. So a lot of collaboration.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's probably key. That's the fun about the job as well.
Yeah, that's great. And then Megan and Mark, your process is a little bit different. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that it always depends on whether it's custom music or whether it's music for our catalog, where we're just offering albums of music that we're creating on a theme, like any album. For custom music, sometimes we get requests that one was as specific as, by tomorrow we need a Creole French lullaby with French lyrics that's this long. And it's like, all right, well, then that's your motivation. So you're starting to look into language, what is a lullaby, and then going from there. And other times it's just, for me anyway, I would say it depends entirely. Melody, mood, it could be anything.
Right. Yeah. It could be anything. I mean, sometimes a particular rhythm may inspire you to write a certain kind of song, or there may be a blank canvas. And, if we're writing for our catalog, it could be a melody or another recording that has inspired us. So that's kind of wide open. Could be a blank canvas.
So when you're doing these catalogs, when you're doing your albums, you said that you find inspiration. Do you make the albums all in a particular mood, or what I mean? Are they all like a big coherent album, or is it something that maybe you'll get a brief from, and then you just make a brief out of that?
I think sometimes it's something that's for a brief, but those still end up being a cohesive set. But a lot of what we release is albums, just like what you would find at a record store, where it's just, these are all the songs that this band would play.
Gotcha.
That would kind of go together as one cohesive project.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's great. That's great. And then Eric, writing for an app, composing for an app is also very different, and the Calm app especially. So when you're working on that project or a different project altogether, where do you start in that sense?
Yeah, it's very similar to everyone else. In general, I would say I start with mood and kind of go from there. If the prompt is something like, we want something in a forest, I'll be like, or I'll think, foresty, and then I'll build an instrumental palette based on that. And then kind of from there, you pick your harmony that also goes with that. Sometimes if I'm like, I'll pick a marimba patch, and the melody that comes from the marimba patch might, hit my ear. I might like it, and I might never have stumbled upon it if I was playing just piano or a different instrument. So the timbre can also inform the melody. So that does tend to come later. And then, yeah, very similar. Like if sometimes you'll get a prompt that is so specific, and that kind of will be like, well, I'm going with that. The Calm, we did do one where it was like they wanted a sleepy Superman sound alike, and it was like, okay, so I have to kind of just listen to the John Williams theme and then kind of pick instruments that are not very intrusive and make a John Williams-y Superman like theme. So kind of that was kind of reverse engineering the harmony and the melody from there. But generally, yeah, I'd say like I think about the mood and then I'll kind of build up from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next question is kind of building on that. Eric, this is for you because not only are you an expert in music production yourself, but you also work on and off stage in the music realm. So how do you navigate that shift between like composing and, live performance and the collaboration part?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, collaboration is such a broad term. I guess like I think of it either I'm at my desk composing or I'm in a room with people, and that's kind of, the rooms could be different. I think when I'm with people and collaborating, I do feel like I'm less protective and less precious of my ideas. That's, again, Thilo kind of said it, like that's the fun of a lot of this, is just like hearing what someone else has to offer and usually making it a lot better. And usually it depends also, like, did someone come to me with an idea for a project and they want me to help with them? Am I starting from square one with someone else? Or is it my idea and then I'm going into the studio and I'm having some experts help bring my idea to life? My perspective is, I think, a little different. Again, I'm less precious if it's someone else's idea. I want to help them make it as good as possible, but I'm not like, oh, this is my baby. It's like, oh, this is my expertise and I'm happy to help. Whereas if it's mine, like it's my idea, I'm probably slightly more protective of it. But even then, it's still like I know that the collaborative ideas are going to usually bring it to the next level. I will say that when I'm by myself and I'm just kind of composing completely in a room alone, I think I do allow myself to explore more, and I'll I'll go on tangents, and an hour will go by and I won't have realized it, and I'll be like, well, I didn't get any of my work done, but I played piano for an hour, and then maybe we'll stumble upon something that I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have stumbled upon this if I was just like working with someone in the room, and vice versa. So yeah, so it's definitely a different process, but it still also comes from the same place of creation.
Do you feel like there's a different type of energy when you're working solo versus collaborating?
Yeah, for sure. I think I think when I'm alone, it's definitely more like, I want to say meditative, or I feel like I get into that quote unquote flow state more, where it's just like stuff is happening. I am a big believer in the like, I don't believe in the gods, the muses, but I am a believer that like The Art of War, I don't know if people have read that. Or The War of Art, sorry, The War of Art. I don't know if people have read that. If you read The Art of War. The War of Art, like they talk about how like, oh, these ideas are everywhere, and it's just kind of up to the artist to put it down on paper. So whether that happens when I'm alone or with people, you're still like letting it happen. But I think, yeah, when I'm alone, it's more meditative and I am exploring more. And then it feels like it happens more quicker when I'm with people, because the energy is more a little bit explosive.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'd love to open that up to everybody.
I record orchestras and I work a lot in live for live shows, like doing Assassin's Creed Symphonic Adventure with like sound design stuff. So then I'm not the composer, but I contribute to the project. And I think it's generally the same across different disciplines. You just wear a different hat, but you all work towards the same goal. So that's why you always give your best, whether that's like your own music or like sound design for a live show. So I think yeah. So it's as long as you have that common goal to create something for someone, it doesn't really matter where I am at the stage in the production chain. I find like it's just as enjoyable to be at any point there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that really speaks to a lot of what we do also. We are recording musicians and we perform, and I think the energy on stage is different, of course, when you're performing in a band versus when you're in the studio or especially composing by yourself. But I think ultimately, just like you're saying, the collaboration is really just figuring out what's our common goal. It's to create great music together.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I find the sort of the collaborative aspect is really important for me to actually get music done, because sometimes when I've been sort of commissioned concert works and they're just like, yeah, just do anything you want, and I have no idea what to do at that point. So
Yeah.
it's much nicer to collaborate, because then you can sort of bounce off ideas and you don't feel like you're completely lost. So yeah.
And I do also think at some point, like, everything is like becomes a collaboration, even if it's like I'm writing something by myself. I'll eventually, talk to other producers, and I'll talk to another mixing engineer or a mastering engineer, and they'll have ideas. So even if it is your own thing, eventually you do have to be open to, working with other people, and know that is music. It is a collaborative art form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just makes it more rich the more you collaborate and bounce ideas off of each other. Yeah, absolutely. Following up with that, Megan and Mark, old saw music is deeply tied to the spirit of New Orleans, and you both perform there, and your large influences in there, and you're very, very strongly influenced by that culture. So, how does that culture's influence your music and your composing and your producing?
I'd say, in a very literal sense, our catalog is full of the music that you would hear all over New Orleans. So we've got, traditional jazz, brass band music, New Orleans R&B, which is kind of New Orleans' answer to Motown. We've got, Mardi Gras music. We even have a whole section of busker music.
Right. So yeah, basically, if you can imagine hearing it in a club or on a street corner or in a New Orleans jazz funeral or any kind of, party, we probably have it in our catalog. Now, we have music in our catalog that's not New Orleans themed, but it's the, New Orleans appreciation for music as part of everyday life that, remains at the heart of everything that we do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. And kind of going back to where the inspiration comes, what are some of the things from the culture that kind of find their way into your music? Is it the
Oh,
instrumentation or?
so many things, and especially as performing musicians, but also there are deep traditions here in New Orleans. I'm a fourth generation New Orleans
Yeah.
musician, and so I've drawn inspiration from my family. There's, my whole life there's always been music around. We were taken to see live music from when we were little kids. It was always around the house. My grandfather, my uncles, my aunts, my cousins. So there was always music around. We would go out at least every weekend. My parents would take my brother and I out to hear live music. We would go hear anything from traditional jazz. We used to go on the President Riverboat to hear the Neville Brothers. So we grew up with this really rich tradition that we were so lucky to be a part of, and so I was really inspired by all the musicians around and all of the musicians in my family as well. And we were, lucky enough to be exposed to different genres of music. And so those different genres are deeply ingrained in part of, in every part of what I do, what we present.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah, I love that. Good, good. So, continuing on with the idea of influences, Tilo, your work often combines classical influences and contemporary production. So, how do you navigate that? How do you blend the classical with kind of more experimental and contemporary influences?
Yeah, I don't really know if my work is very classic. Like I was definitely trained classical, so I have that background. I started playing violin when I was six, then clarinet, and then I actually studied what they called classical clarinet. But it was in The Hague at the Royal Conservatoire, and they had like a huge, like very advanced program in composition. So a lot of composers like Louis Andriessen were teaching there. So a lot of like contemporary classical music. So when I started there, that's when I started to be exposed to so much more than like the what people consider classical music, like all the extended playing techniques, and really avant-garde modern acoustic composition, but also electroacoustics works. And I think that's influencing me quite a bit. So like that world that I picked up during my studies. And then at the same time, I also studied art of sound, a music production degree, which was always very technologically very heavy on the technology. So there was always that combination there between using technology and using an acoustic instrument for work. And I find that for composing, in my mind, there's not that much of a difference writing for an instrument like an acoustic instrument or writing for a, let's say, software synthesizer. You have to know the instruments, what's possible, and then you have to create with the means possible what you want to create. So the advantage of working with acoustic instruments is that you can actually work with performers, and they are a huge deal. Like they may brings all the difference to a piece of music that I couldn't imagine when I write it. So I sketch it on a piece of paper, or I give them the score, and they interpret that score because musical notation isn't perfect. And there might be some moments where I say, no, I didn't like it that way, but there might be some moments where they interpret like a melody line in a different way that I didn't think of, that you can interpret it that way, and it sounds so amazing. I just go with that. So that's the advantage of working with acoustic instruments rather than software synthesizers where I have to program them myself, I would say. But yeah, so I've always liked learning new software and technology. Like I remember I was one of the first people around me who put up height speakers before Dolby Atmos became a thing. And everyone thought I was a little weird that I had 8 speakers around me in my living room, but I just enjoyed exploring what's possible with it and on a creative level. So it's, yeah, so I enjoy the technology a lot.
Yeah. Is there anything you're experimenting with right now?
I mean, still spatial stuff, like immersive audio, now that's more mainstream. And I've really gotten more into controllers, like especially like playing software synthesizers with hand motion, and I have a breath byte controller. So basically, like just like interfacing with instruments so that they become more natural to me as a musician who grew up like playing a physical instrument. because that's what I mean. It's nothing new really, but that's like where I spend a lot of time when I'm in between projects is refining how I control the instruments, like how I play the software that I have to create music with.
Yeah, it's a little bit more intuitive if you grew up playing like an acoustic instrument to have some.
Exactly, yeah. And also like you can control multiple parameters at once. You don't have to be an octopus to like move sliders up and down, but you can like use a wind controller or a hand gesture like to control 4, 5, 6 parameters at once while you play the instrument. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really, really interesting. I love that. To continue on with that whole idea, Panu, I'd love to ask you a question. So your scores, they're not only beautiful and set the mood, but they are also very good at setting location and setting a place. So, how do you do that? Like we've talked about how you can set the mood with music, but how do you create a sense of like location? Is it texture or is it instrumentation? What is your process in that?
Yeah, I think for location, it very often starts from instrumentation and it doesn't have to be sort of instruments that are sort of geographically correct. Like Little Siberia, there's a good example where we're sort of searching for sounds with the director that sort of gave this sense of very sort of cold climate, and we settle on using these sort of gamelan music type metallophone percussion instruments, which obviously have nothing to do with Finnish folk music or anything like that, but they just seem to fit really well, and so that was sort of one way. But of course, if you can find instruments that really come from the history of the location, then even better. And certainly on that film, I used like the Finnish jouhikko, which is this sort of bowed lyre, which has a history here that goes back centuries, and that really seemed to sort of evoke the sense of the small town in the film. So sometimes there's something very local that works, but I don't automatically go for, like I was trying out like the Finnish kantele, which is like this zither type instrument, which is like probably the first thing people think of in Finnish folk music, and it didn't really fit that film. So I don't automatically go for sort of whatever is local to the place, but whatever sort of just fits the as a sound itself.
Oh, that's really interesting. So is it just a lot of research, right? How do you find the different instruments that you use?
Yeah, it's a sort of going on I'll watch like YouTube videos of try to find like esoteric with two views, like somebody playing some crazy instrument and hopefully get some ideas of that. So it's just it's research basically. Just try to dig under all the rocks and hopefully find something that you didn't think of immediately, because those are usually the best ones.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it helps with the mood, and it also creates like a location of where we are, and it just helps with all the storytelling.
Yeah, and it also gives a sense of originality to the story, because that's always part of it, that you want something where the film really feels unique, so it's not just like everything else. So that's also a good way to have that.
Yeah, it's true. And then the setting becomes almost another character. So yeah. That's really interesting. So talking to all of you, it really seems that the collaboration and bouncing ideas off of each other and getting outside influences really enriches your creativity and your music production. So my question is, and this is a question for everybody, how, when you're dealing with all of this collaboration and, deeply personal music or music that's telling a story, how do you know when something's done and ready to put out in the world? And Panu, why don't we start with you? How do you know when something's finished?
I would say in film and TV, that's usually, I know it's done because they take it out of my embrace and forcibly take it away because so there's a deadline. So that's usually how I know it's done. That's actually been kind of a blessing, because it's sort of, I had a really hard time sort of finishing when I was just writing music as a hobby. I would just keep tinkering on the pieces forever, because I didn't really have a good sense of when it's done. I think along the years I've kind of developed more of a sense. So I've noticed in projects I kind of know when I've finished with the big brush strokes, basically. So I can see when I'm sort of chiseling at the edges rather than doing the big things anymore. So then I kind of know like it's a couple of rounds of notes that I'll do for myself. So I'll like go through the whole film or whatever is the project, and I'll go through the whole thing and just write down whatever I notice, and I'll do that like 2 times. And once I've done that, it's like, yeah, it's done.
Yeah, love that. Tilo, how about you?
Yeah, like the deadlines tell me when it's done. I'd say usually, and I'm like Panu. Like when I wrote concert music, like I could spend like if there wasn't a premiere scheduled, I would basically spend a couple of years on a piece, and I could have spent the rest of my life on one piece. So that's what I love about the collaborative aspect of film scoring, because like other people are going to tell you when it's done, not just the deadline, but when something works really well for the film. For example, I just had like I scored a documentary feature. I actually sent it off to the director or to the mastering last week, and there was this one cue that I actually wanted to fix up still. I was like, okay, this is, yeah, I think this is good enough to send off to the director to see if that direction is good. And he basically got back to me and said, like, I cried during the scene. I've seen it so many times. Like, don't change a thing. And like, oh, I guess I'm done. so and I still mixed it a little bit. And then another thing that really helps me is that I always work with the same mastering engineer. So then he takes care of finishing it in a way. So like even though there might be things in the mix or in the composition where I'm not 100% certain about, but like because of deadlines or whatever, I send it out, and then when it comes back, like he does his magic, and then like, okay, now it sounds like a score. Like it's done. Like let's send it off to re-recording, and they mix it in. So
Yeah, so he kind of takes it out of your hands so you can...
exactly, I don't have to make the decision that it's finished. Like I send it off. Like it's like, yeah, art isn't finished. It's just abandoned, right? I think so. So you abandon it, and I pass that finishing thing off to my mastering engineer, and I really trust him with everything I do. So I know that he's going to finish it well. So I think that really helps. Like having other people help you with that step of saying, okay, that piece of music is finished is worth a lot. Otherwise, I'd still be composing that one piece I started 10 years ago. So.
True. Eric, how about you?
Yeah, same. Obviously, deadlines help. Yeah, and if you send something out to a client and they're like, yeah, this is good. I think the worry when you don't finish something, you're always worried it's not good enough. So as long as someone says, yeah, it's good enough, then you're like, well, that's gone. So that's good. I do think I had a teacher once say that you get to a point, especially with mixing, that you're not fixing, you're just changing. Like you'll just wake up one day and you'll be like, oh, I actually want this instrument lower than I did yesterday. So you have to like kind of recognize when you're at that point where you're just like, I am just tinkering because I can. And it is a weird, dangerous, almost pitfall of the level of technology now, where you can like look at the waveforms and be like, well, this one isn't perfectly on beat, so I guess it's not perfect. Oh no. So you kind of have to recognize that, like, yeah, imperfection is part of music and part of being human and all that. I do sometimes think it sometimes helps me to think of the music as like the song or the piece is like the abstract thing in my brain, and what I'm making is like the current version. I can always do a remaster in a few years. I'm curious have people listened to that supercut of the intro to Beethoven's Third Symphony? I don't know if it's like gone around. So like the intro to Beethoven's Third Symphony is just like 2 E flat chords. It's just like dun dun, right? But even just that can be like interpreted differently, and there's a supercut of just like every orchestra doing it, and everyone is like, it's not the same tempo, it's not the exact same pitch, and it's just like the idea of the symphony is there. It's just with that version of it, that orchestra's version of it was what happened that day because of the conductor and the concert hall it was in and the timbre of the instruments and the instrumentalists playing it. So just like knowing that, like, especially with music production, you are making something that's obviously going to go to a client and is going to be either, you know, accompanying something, and that's going to be sold or whatever. But that's just like a version of the idea of your piece, and it's okay if it's not if it's the definitive piece that's out in the world. It doesn't have to be the definitive piece that exists in the abstract or in your head. You can always think of it that way.
Yeah, that works. How about you, Mark? and Megan?
I would say that, first of all, I love the question, and everyone smiled at exactly the same time because I think it's such a universal thing. Like, when is it finished? And I think one fun thing we have with our catalog is that we have projects that are an internal sense of finished and an external sense of finished. So it's like, when it's for our catalog, it's finished when we feel like it is, which to me, that's like that thing of when is it still human? When have you told the whole story and then you gotta stop, you know? And then for other people, when there's a client that's requesting the music, obviously it's finished when the client's happy. And then, as Tilo was saying, there's also an element of just you might want to still zhuzh it up a little bit, but ultimately it's finished for someone else when it's custom music and they're happy with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we're writing for our catalog, and it's not a a prompt or a brief. There's a lot that goes into it beforehand. The song is written, and then you have to pick the tempo for a certain mood that you're trying to convey, the instrumentation, and then you might get to the point where you've recorded some things and like, oh, it needs this, or it needs horns, it needs strings, or it needs guitar. So, but like Megan was saying, you have a sense of when it's finished, when the story is told.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I like that. I like that when the story is told. And then you just hand it off, let it go. To kind of follow up with Megan and Mark, to follow up with what we were talking about earlier about how a lot of your catalog is kind of a love letter to New Orleans. And of course, you have a huge variety of music in your catalog. You've got jazz and funk and cinematic. But how do you stay authentic to these different genres, but still make your music marketable?
I would say, as far as staying true to the genres and authentic, really, we're just making sure that the musicians who are playing the music are the people who play this music. So sometimes that's us, and sometimes we're calling someone else in to play something.
Yeah. So I mean, whether it's a funk band or R&B or folk band, we want the musicians playing the music to be the musicians whose heart is into this 365 days a year.
Yeah. And as far as the marketability, I mean, there's the technical aspects of just making sure that we've got all the alternate mixes that we need so that someone can use it and it's convenient and production friendly. But then other than that, we're just thinking, what are shows and movies we love? What are things that would serve these scenes? What kind of music are people connecting to? And so we're just always trying to think of things that we connect to and other people connect to, and creating with that in mind.
If the purpose is background jazz, we make sure that that's music that stays in the background. There's no overwhelming like soloist wailing or anything like that. Now, if it's a brass band playing New Orleans party music, then we just let that remain what it is. It is what it is, and if the client is looking for party music, there it is. We're not trying to rein anybody in.
Right.
Right. But if its purpose is to be in the background, you just kind of adjust the arrangement to fit.
Right, because we keep in mind that there's always dialogue. There's something else that might be happening in the scene, and you don't want it to be a distraction.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Pana, do you find it the same because you were using a lot of Finnish instruments? Is it the same for you? How do you keep things authentic but then still serve the story?
I think if I think of like Little Siberia, I was sort of going with the story like 100%, and there's not a sense of like it's not like authentic Finnish folk music, for example. Like there's strange actually, if you think of geographically, not just the instruments, but like the melody almost seems like it could be like Balkan based folk music or something. So it just goes in all kinds of directions because it just seemed to serve the movie is kind of this fairly strange crime comedy, and it feels very off center. So that the music, the big point of the music was to help that and keep the sense that you really don't know what's going to happen next. And I found not being sort of very faithful to any particular sort of music style was a good way to do that, because it's just the score is kind of all over the place, and then it felt like it supported the story the best. So yeah, I think authenticity is I guess that could be many things, but if I'm thinking strictly of like if what you could do, because it is like a typical thing in film where if you have this sort of very sort of folksy little town where you have stuff happening, you would write sort of very sort of, you could try sort of very typical folk music that could be out of that town or something like that. But we kind of went in a very different direction with that just to support the story.
Yeah, I like that. I like that how you kind of went outside of the authenticity to create that mood of, oh no, I don't know, so it can be used one way and then it can be used the exact opposite way to serve that story. Yeah, I love that. I think that's so great. Another big issue that's happening with the music industry is technology. So this is a question for everybody. So technology has changed so much. I mean, honestly, just in the last years, but over the decades, technology has changed. So what is one tool or innovation that has completely transformed your process? So that's the first. And then what is one old school technique or method that you're never going to let go of?
If you go back more and more, like everything is digital now, and obviously working in digital audio workstations, like that's different than, 50 years ago. I think of all that stuff, the like technology that I use the most, and again, I think most people do, but like quantizing notes and stuff and like getting notes a little quote unquote more perfect, obviously to a place where it still feels human. It's just kind of like correcting maybe a take that I did because I could have done it better. In terms of things that like can never be replaced, and I think this goes along with it, is first one is real people playing music like that. AI will never get there. It's a limit approaching zero, but there is something ineffable about music. Is a very human thing. There is something about humans doing it, and even if it gets 99.9% of the way there is something that humans just will be able to do that a computer can't. So studio musicians 100% always. I kind of think of it like as like Van Gogh's like paintings. Like he wasn't trying to paint a perfect starry night. You can like see the brushstrokes and you can see the humanity in it, and that is what music is. So I think one thing that I think every musician ever will die in the hill of like, let's have it be humans. On a smaller thing, the only thing that other comes to mind is like mixing in mono. I don't know if other people do that. I always just like mixing in mono, and that's just something that I probably will never shy away from. But yeah, I think the weird like two sides of the coin of AI right now is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes as it develops, because it's just changing so quickly. It's kind of insane.
I think there will be a big reaction to it, and I think like in the same way that like grunge happened in the 90s because of the overproduction of like electronica and stuff in the 80s. I think like people are going to be, it's the same thing with everything, like live theater and live performance just in general. People are going to be very soon, you can recognize things that are done in a computer and it is not attractive. It's why like people are using more practical effects now in movies too, because like we get a CG thing just looks like a CG thing now, even if it's really, really close. So I think there's just going to be a big reaction, and people are going to be gravitating towards quote unquote imperfection, but really humanity and all that.
Yeah, I could see that happening. Tilo, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question because you don't know like how that you just said it, like what's that going to be like in 10 years, and then we will see the impact of it, right? So if I look at the tools I'm using, probably the tool that I've been using the most is my coffee warmer that keeps coffee warm in my studio, which I got for Christmas from my sister at some point. Still runs on European 230 volt. I use a voltage converter, not just for it, but that's the one tool that I always use and have been using for the past 10 years every day, whether I just like compose analog or on the computer. So that's one of the old school tools that I'm not going to give up, except like, I mean, jokingly, but of course, like the acoustic instruments, like because I find I think very differently whether I sit in front of a computer or at my piano or on the clarinet, because it's just like for a while I thought I have to find this one way of composing music. And I was like, oh, that's a problem, because I go to the piano, I go to the clarinet, then I go back to like my computer. And I thought I was losing time, but I think it actually helps me to like just switch perspective and actually get other ideas while I sit on a different instrument. So I wouldn't give up the acoustic instruments and obviously musicians. And I think like one of the innovative tools, I already mentioned that I love all the spatial audio things. Like I love composing in 3D. Like I love mixing in mono as well, but like I like composing in surround and immersive, because when you have to work with samples and when you have to work with software instruments, it just feels more real and more emotional if it's surrounding you. And then even though sometimes they just want stereo stems and stereo mixes, then I down mix it to stereo, but I still have that feeling while I compose that the sound is coming from all around me. And then I already mentioned the control devices, like very affordable control devices. Like you can get cheap sensors now and build your own instrument, like, or not the instrument itself, but the way to interact with the instrument to actually make it intuitive and musical for you to play that instrument. So
yeah, very cool. Megan and Mark, how about you?
Okay, so I would say as far as a tool that is more contemporary that I love, it would definitely be the DAW or Sibelius or whatever has a playback function, because it's really nice to be able to hear all these horn parts before we hit the studio. It's like the perfect proofreader to make sure that everything sounds the way you think it sounds, because the piano only gets you so far with knowing how things might actually blend. And as far as old school, I would say, now I want to say coffee too, but my two main ones would definitely be staff paper and a piano, or just live musicians in a studio. Those are the things that I think I could never replace.
Really, staff paper, like in a pencil? Still writing?
Yeah, absolutely.
We both. That's how we both write.
Yeah. Now I have my favorite paper, my favorite pencils. It's all down to a science here.
Yeah.
I love that. You know, I actually saw a study about that, and it wasn't necessarily about writing music, but it was about students learning in school. And there's something about physically writing with a pencil that connects you more. And that's not against anyone who only composes digitally. Nothing against that. I'm not saying that, but there is something kind of visceral about writing it down on a piece of paper.
I definitely feel that way for me. Yeah.
I think our processes are very similar. And then depending on what I'm writing, I'm either at the piano or, if I'm writing horn lines, I'll just actually play it on my trumpet. And, sometimes I'll do something like, I'll play 4 parts into, I'll create a track and I'll play 4 trumpet parts, and I, imagine this is a trumpet, an alto, a tenor, and a trombone. I just want to hear what those sounds sound like. So, it's just part of my process sometimes, but I'm usually writing from an acoustic instrument and writing it down on paper, and then we'll, sometimes we'll have a stack of songs like that waiting to be input into Sibelius, and then we'll distribute the instruments, do virtual instruments to see what it's going to sound like, or Sibelius playback or whatever it might be. So like Megan was saying, that's a very valuable tool for us. It makes, it lets us know what it might sound like before we get into the studio.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. All right, Panu, what's your tools of choice?
Yeah, I guess for modern tools, I would say the thing that has changed my work the most in recent years has been changing my DAW to be the Reaper, because I used to be on Cubase and Logic before, but I have a computer programming background. That was actually sort of my original profession that I was supposed to be before I sort of ended up as a film composer. So I always felt frustrated that I couldn't make other programs do what I wanted them to do. And then when I switched to Reaper, I have been sort of eyeing it on for a while, and because you kind of write scripts for it basically and make it do basically anything, and I just sort of started this side hobby of like I would compose during the day, and in the evening I would just be writing code for Reaper and just implementing all the ideas I got during the day, and it just sort of has accumulated now for over a couple of years where I have like this very, very custom system that is basically a lot of something that I couldn't have done anywhere else. And my big thing is always to just minimize the friction from idea to something that comes out of the speakers. And I've really been able to do that a lot more with that thing. So I think that's for modern things, that's my choice. For the old school things, I think it's sort of like I want the music to start and end in acoustic form. So I when I went to USC, one of the many things that I remember from there is Chris Young saying about composing, like when you're composing, get your hands off the keyboard. And that sort of variation of like Morricone's, like you need to think music before you write it. And I really felt that's made it better every time when I've spent the time sort of thinking maybe just in my head, and when I have some kind of idea of the music, then maybe going just in front of the piano and sketching out some and just trying out chords or whatever, and not jumping into the computer immediately, because it can very easily become, you can get very lost in just browsing different patches and just I don't like to get in front of the computer before I have a good idea of what I'm doing. And of course, like others mentioned, that you really want to have live musicians play the end result if possible. So that's always where I like to end up as well. So the computer is just a phase in between.
Yeah, these are all great answers. I love it. I love hearing all the different ways that you approach music, and how I just love hearing all of this. This next question is for Tilo and Panu, but I think that it also would work for everybody. So so Eric and Megan, Mark, if you want to jump in at any time with this one, that's totally fine. So Tilo and Panu, both of you compose for stories that rely heavily on emotion, which is very deeply personal. How do you balance what a director wants from you with your own creativity?
I mean, the director's involved very early on, because we have a lot of conversation about the story and about the music and the concept that I propose, or that we create together. Like it's that constant conversation about, okay, like how can we tackle this? Like how can we create the best score for this story? So yeah, like I involved them very early on, and then one thing that I notice is the more personal I'm writing, the more they seem to like it lately, which is interesting, because like I always tried, like for a while I tried to write what I think they wanted or what I thought they wanted. So, and then I wasn't writing like my personal music. I was basically like writing what I thought was expected of me. And the more like personal I've composed my music, the more the directors seem to like it, which makes sense, because it's like I actually bring something to the table that they wouldn't have thought of, right? So it's one of the things that I found out over the past 3 years. I wish I would have learned that like 10 years ago, but I guess it's part of the learning process. Also, the emotions, they're not coming from the music alone. Like it's contextual based. So like the emotions are created by the story, by the characters, by the acting, by the edit, and the music is just playing one part of that. So like it can be super emotional music by itself. Like if it's not fitting the context, then like that emotion might actually be decreased. So that's I think that's very important, that it's part of the context, it's part of the whole thing, and that creates the emotion. So sometimes the emotions are stronger if you set up a cue that it's like bigger before, and then you tone it down to almost nothing, and that can be way more emotional than like very sad big melodies. So like it's a lot of planning involved, how you want to create the emotions like throughout the film, and a lot of that is happening in spotting sessions as well, like the mapping out beforehand. That helps. Also, like then working with the director, because I kind of know what is expected of the music throughout the film.
Yeah Panu?
Yeah, definitely. Like as Dilo said, the context is really important, and it's sort of like in terms of my own voice coming through, I've actually found it sort of in these sort of emotional catharsis or payoff scenes in films that's where there's most potential for my sort of own sort of how I like to compose to come through. But you have to be very careful, because then the context is so important. You cannot be sort of going in your own world like, oh, I've always wanted to compose this big piece, and then doesn't fit at all. And it's actually that process is very, very, you have to be careful, because if you sort of ruin it the first time you present the director something for this big scene that kind of makes it melodramatic, or just is a bit off or cheesy or whatever, you basically ruin your chances of just making that work at that point, because then they're going to be really careful about the music and just like, yes, keep everything really small and just don't play anything. And so the way to really approach that is to be so sort of precise about the emotion you're building, because you can kind of get in the ballpark quite quickly, but to actually nail it so that it really feels earned and just like it's perfect for this important scene. That's one of the hardest things, I think, and that's probably the thing I'll spend the most time, besides the initial theme building, is trying to get these to work, because then once you have that work in the whole context, then you can sort of backtrack and you can build it up to that point. But it's very, very, very hard to get it just right. So that's where I often spend a lot of effort. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
Sure. I would say, for me, as far as the having your own voice shine through, I think this is maybe a different take on this, but it's probably a universal experience. I know in jazz school, which was my background, I always felt like people were saying like, find your sound. And it was like this directive to find out like what your sound is. And I always felt like your sound finds you. Like you just keep playing and writing things that you love and listening to things you love, and like you accidentally come upon, maybe not accidentally, but over time, you just sort of turn into the thing that is your sound.
Yeah.
So I think if you're always creating from a place of joy or curiosity or love of the project, then you're able to have your sound without being like, how do I make this sound like me? It just happens.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then everything you do, it sounds like you. It doesn't matter how small the part is,
right,
or
you
how
don't
big
have
the
to
part
think
is.
about
Right,
it.
it's just you are you are you. It's how you would write that. I always think when I'm working with someone, I always think of the scene in Amadeus where the emperor's like, there's too many notes, and I always have to be like, you're not Mozart. Like the director's allowed to be like, the director's allowed to say there's too many notes here. You just like, you're like, all right, I'll take another pass of it. I think just like being cool with letting it's collaborative. It's part of that. If they don't like it, then you roll with it and you go on. But yeah. Whenever that happens. I think about that.
Yeah, I love it. It just goes back to the collaboration and serving the project, serving the story, and just the joy and how you're enhanced when you work together. Absolutely. All right, so our final question for our panel, for our wonderful panelists: what is one piece of advice you'd give to an emerging composer or producer about thriving in both the creative and technical aspects of the music industry?
I'll say that I think it has to be two pieces of advice in my mind, at least. One would be for the creative aspect, just find joy in what you're doing. And for the technical thing, follow directions really well. It's really important. If people want files sent a certain way, or if they want things just like whatever they're looking for, give people what they're asking for so that they don't have to come back and say, no, I wanted that as an MP3, or no, I wanted that as a wave. Just basic following directions goes so far.
Right. And keep an open mind, because there's not one way to do anything, especially when it comes to art and creating. There may be times where the director may want a different tempo or a different mood, a different key, just to shift the mood a little bit. So you have to be, even though you've created this piece, you have to still be open to change and also other people's ideas, and that's what collaborating is about. Everyday life is collaborating. You
Mm-hmm.
collaborate. You don't live in a vacuum. You, you collaborate. You interact with people. So it's the same in art, and especially if you're involved in co-composing or working with a director, you you have to maintain an open mind and be willing to compromise here or there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the overarching theme of this whole conversation is that like music is collaborative and you're not doing it ever by yourself. So very, very similar. Yeah, I think for any newer composers, just like be cool, like be a nice person. I know like I've worked with people who are absolute musical geniuses and absolute nightmares to work with, and I will never work with them again. And I've worked with people who are fantastic, and they might not be might not go down in the annals of history as the greatest so and so, but they're really capable and they're really smart and they're really fun, and I will give them the job every time. The same for you. I know for a fact that I have gotten jobs that other people have lost because they were difficult to work with. So yeah, be cool. Don't be too precious with your stuff. Again, if someone says there's too many notes, just be cool with it. Yeah, and just like yeah, it's all collaboration. We live in a very like celebrity obsessed culture, which it's getting even more and more celebrity obsessed with like influencer culture and stuff. But you got to take your ego out of it. Everything is teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work. And that's the last thing I'll say.
Love it. Hey, Panu, how about you?
Well, I would say just build a strong intuition for your art. I mean, if you want to do film scoring, build an intuition for how films are made, or what. Just watch a lot of films and also learn your tools so well that you kind of have intuition about them, because it's sort of like we're obviously going to go through and already going through a big shakeup of how art is made, but something that artificial intelligence is not going to be very good for a long time is taste, and so just develop good taste, and I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, love that. All right, Tilo, take us home.
Yeah, it's like whenever I'm asked that question, I think I've been asked that a lot also when I was working as a professor. I find I give a different answer because I think it's like I learned something new that I wish I would have known that 5 years ago. So I guess then the answer now is like keep learning and be curious and just keep developing, enjoying the process. I think Megan said earlier that you're always told to find your voice, but your voice is going to develop while working at it. And you have to enjoy that process and just follow your intuition, and then it's gonna be fun and rewarding too.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. And thank you for sharing your expertise and your experiences with all of us. That's all the time we have for today. So we want to thank our panelists, Eric and Megan and Mark, Tilo and Panu, for being here with us today to discuss their incredible work. Thank you so much, everybody.